Sikkim 365 and Baylor Plus have teamed up to bring Baylor fans the ultimate content bundle. You can sign up now for $17.99 a month, a $5 monthly savings, and get instant access to all premium content on both websites. For more information, visit either sikkim365.com or baylorplus.com today. What's up, Baylor family? Welcome into Inside Baylor Sports, the official daily podcast of Baylor Athletics. It's Thursday, October 31st. In a little bit, we're going to give you our defensive keys to the games against TCU this weekend. You also hear our interview with Baylor outside linebackers coach Caleb Collins. But we did find it appropriate to talk about Baylor's basketball for a moment for Scott Drew's team opening up on Monday. Super late game against Gonzaga, but it's a top 10 matchup at 10:30 p.m. Central Time after the Monday Night Football game on ESPN2. But on Wednesday, Baylor released a new jersey, basketball uniforms, their gold basketball uniforms with a retro script on the front. It's actually from the 70s. It's the Vinnie Johnson era. Really cool. Has a Sailor Bear emblem on it. And, I mean, you don't really get excited about basketball uniform changes because they happen so often. But this one kind of, struck a chord with me. I really, really like them. And I'm anxious to see them on the court. Man, you have any personal thoughts on that uniform setup, Grayson? I know you're a basketball guy.
I like them a lot. I've always been a fan of retro. I think the retro uniforms are really cool. I think putting the Sailor Bear on a uniform outside of football is really nice as well. I don't think we've seen that on any jersey outside of football. So that's really cool. I like that that's kind of a staple for the program. And obviously the script looks awesome too. I know there's conversation on Sikkim 365 talking about how it'd be cool to have that script on like a football helmet, for instance, a decal. That could be kind of cool as well. So in general, I mean, this is just great stuff. The promo they did for it, the video with Langston Love, Jaden Nunn, and Josh O was really, really cool. And I think it's just one of those things where it's like perfect timing, right? They're about to have this big matchup coming up and give the fans something even more to be excited about. As we know, there's huge expectations for this team, but I think it's a nice little teaser for what they're about to see coming up on Monday.
Yeah, a top 10 matchup with Gonzaga. It's hard to believe basketball is already here. I think, 3 weeks ago, it would have been like, all right, when's basketball season getting here? Right? Like, it's like football's not going well. And then it's like basketball season's next up. But then football wins and it kind of takes the storyline back a little bit. They've won 2 games in a row. But that's a big game. I mean, big game to open the season for Scott Drew. Late tip, as I mentioned earlier, 10:30 Central Time. So it's out there on the West Coast in Washington. But it's it's late night basketball, and it's kicking off basketball season in a lot of ways. So great matchup there. Obviously, Scott Drew and Mark Few have gotten that rivalry going outside of the national championship game and had a few scheduled games. And now this one will actually be played this year. So anxious to see that game, but it is football season still. And Baylor has a huge game coming up with TCU. 2 games ago, this game was like, it was a big game, but after you win 2 in a row, Grayson, it's like, man, this game, it's gotten even that much bigger, right? Like now you're playing for a lot. You're playing to be 5-4, which is above 500. It doesn't sound like a lot, but considering where Baylor's been, it's been tough. And this is a game against TCU, who's 5-3. Both teams have won 2 in a row. Another kind of rivalry game. Tech, Oklahoma State, TCU 3 in a row. Re-engage the fans if you get a win. We're going to hear from Coach Caleb Collins in a little bit. And talk to him maybe about some defensive keys and stuff like that. But that's where we're starting with this episode is defensive keys for Baylor against TCU. Grayson, I'll just toss it up to you. What's your first key to this game? And as Baylor gets into a rivalry game against TCU that they've only won against once in a long time.
Right. And so I think where I kind of want to start is just a trend that has been pretty evident, throughout the season for TCU. And it's the stat that I mentioned when we talked about it earlier this week, but TCU is 5-0 when they run for at least 100 yards, and they're 0-3 when they don't reach the 100-yard mark. I don't necessarily think Baylor can't win this game if TCU runs for 100 yards. But I think they are definitely winning this game if they run for less than 100 yards. So I think that's kind of the tug and pull there. Obviously, if Baylor gives up 200 yards rushing in this game, they're probably going to lose. So you got to be able to hold down the run, because the thing that I think is going to be really important and kind of a chess match is I think Baylor needs to be able to drop more guys into coverage. I think they need to be a little more diverse with their coverages, bring blitzes from different spots. And so you have to be able to stop the run still in those situations and not give up, draws that go for 20 yards, or not give up, just handoffs against a light box that end up just kind of killing you. You have to be able to kind of do a little bit of both. And with what Baylor's kind of been going through in the secondary against this kind of offense, again, they need to be able to drop guys into coverage, and they need to be able to say, like, hey, we want our edge rushers to get after the quarterback and not necessarily have to be super worried about the run. So again, it's that tug and pull. I think they're going to give up some yards, but I think it's just very key kind of how many yards they give up in this game on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's almost the opposite of Oklahoma State game, right? Like, I think that Baylor went into that game and said, Ollie Gordon, dude, we know you're good. You're not going to beat us. Like, that's the end game. And you knew that Alan Bowman was going to get you, or you kind of gave him that betting game of, hey, Alan Bowman's probably going to throw some interceptions or put the ball in harm's way. Now, he did really good at not doing that, and it created issues for Baylor, tackling issues. We can get into all that again, but there's a lot of things that Baylor struggled with, but what they wanted to do was take Ollie Gordon away. They took him away. Now, in this game, dude, like, if you're having to overcommit in the box, and this was at one of my points, and I'm going to put it in here, is make TCU one-dimensional. They already do that enough themselves, but if you allow them to use Savion Williams, for instance, who has rushed for 144 of their 249 rushing yards the last two games, 72 yards even both games. If you're allowing that to influence what you're doing defensively against the pass, that's a major issue. Like, you can't do that in this game. And Sonny Dykes, Kendall Briles, the run game is there to at least kind of keep you honest. Like, they don't, even in that extent, it's kind of like, hey, you might get a 10-yard run, but it's not going to be that much of a concern. You definitely can't do what Texas Tech did and give up a 35-yard touchdown run like the first possession of the game. But like, they have to control that. TCU is going to allow you to make them one-dimensional. It won't take much to do it. They just have to do it early and not let TCU have both ways.
Right. And the fascinating thing is, and going into this matchup, this is my belief, it could be proven wrong, but I frankly think Baylor's going to be really excited anytime that TCU goes Savion Williams in the Wildcat. I think that just plays into Baylor's hand, because then it's like, oh, okay, so you're going to try to run against us while we can load the box, and you're expecting to get these explosive plays that you haven't really gotten all year. And then you're not really giving yourself the ability to attack Baylor's secondary, which has had some ups and downs this year. I could be proven wrong. Maybe Savion Williams breaks off an 80-yard touchdown run. And, I look dumb saying this, but I just think in general, from a mindset standpoint, I actually think that's kind of feeding into Baylor's hand a little bit if they want to just put Savion Williams back there and be kind of one-dimensional in that regard.
I think what they've done, and they have done it both ways, but they put him back there as a running back, and that's where they got the long touchdown pass, and he's lined up in the backfield. But if you're talking just direct snaps with no quarterback in sight, then it's a pretty easy read. And TCU, truthfully, has rode this for 2 weeks. They did it against Utah. They did it against Texas Tech. And I don't want to call it a gimmick, because I think it's more than that. I think Savion Williams is a good enough athlete that it's not a gimmick for the things that he can do. And then, truthfully, like, if you go 4 wide and put him in the backfield and run a streak, out of the backfield, he's a threat. Texas Tech was susceptible to that. He took off and scored a 75-yard touchdown against Texas Tech out of the backfield on a catch. And but if they're lining him up back out there straight up as a wildcat quarterback, then obviously it plays into Baylor's hands. I don't know how much they'll do that. And I'm with you. Like, if you're taking that route against Baylor's rush defense, who has shown when they want to can just eliminate a rushing offense. Most recently against Oklahoma State, but they also did it to Texas Tech to a great extent. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'm with you. And then that goes to my next point, or my second key, and it's tackle. I mean, truthfully, man, like, against Oklahoma State, Baylor had 14 missed tackles against Oklahoma State. The only other game they had more than that was against Iowa State, and we know how that one went. Fortunately, Baylor was able to win this one with 14 missed tackles, but TCU, they've forced a ton of missed tackles. Tech 14, Utah only had 9, which you look at that game and it was 13-7. They only had 9 missed tackles. Houston had 14, Kansas had 14, SMU had 21, which is crazy considering they beat TCU the way they did. UCF only had 10. and UCF won that game. Sanford had 14. If Baylor can stay in like 12 or below missed tackles, that includes the secondary, they're going to stand a pretty good chance, because that means they're not getting those, first, maybe they don't convert a first down because of a missed tackle. Maybe they don't, and you're not going to completely eliminate it, but they absolutely have to be better than they were against Oklahoma State in that area, missed tackles.
Right, and Savion Williams is really tough to tackle. Jack Besh is really hard to tackle. Eric McAllister has proven at times he can be difficult to bring down as well. And I think in the run game, like, if Cam Cook or Jeremy Payne are running the football, you really need your first guy to be taking them down. That's been that's been what other teams have been able to do against them. So I do think that's a good point, because again, you start missing tackles and you start giving up explosive plays and touchdowns, like we saw with Brendan Presley, on the sideline, where you have a guy on 3rd and 5, you have him tackled. It should be 4th and 7. And instead it's a 35-yard touchdown. Like, those are the things that you can't allow to happen. And TCU will take advantage of those, and they're more than capable of making those situations happen.
Yeah, and that I haven't felt like it's been an issue for Baylor. The Iowa State game notwithstanding, like, it was like, to me in that game, it was an anomaly of sorts. Like, Baylor just couldn't do anything defensively in that game. They struggled in that game, and since that point, we know what Dave Aranda said. They've simplified so many things. And it's almost like they're playing more free, more green, as Coach Aranda likes to say. So I'm really anxious to see how they bounce back from that Oklahoma State game. Brendan Presley, I don't know how many he forced in that game. On that one play, it seemed like 4. So like that, he did raise the bar in terms of missed tackles. But obviously that's 2 games in the last 3 where Baylor's had issues tackling. They can't do that this week against TCU. What's your next one? I'll let you go.
Yeah,
since I jumped on this.
I think this one's going to be a pretty unanimous one. It's Baylor's defense forcing turnovers. They absolutely need to. We talked about it a little bit earlier in the week, just kind of this mindset of, if you went to this game and you said TCU wasn't going to turn the ball over at all, what would the line be? And I think it might be TCU might be the favorite in this game if you told me that, if that was a given going into it. I think it's really important. TCU's turned the ball over 3+ times in 4 games this year. They've had at least 1 turnover in 5 straight games. I mean, they are giving up the football a ton. And they're just kind of saying here, we're going to air it out. We're going to take our chances in the pass game. And then when our guys get the football, we're trying to get yards after catch, and we might fumble the football, or, just bad ball security in general, from the quarterback to the running backs to the wide receivers. It just has been kind of all over. Interceptions and fumbles, it's all over tape. And so, can Baylor force those turnovers? And Baylor has not been good at forcing turnovers so far this year. So something has to give in that regard. But I think it's very important, especially at home, that Baylor gets these turnovers and capitalizes on them, because I think that's the kind of situation where you could see kind of a snowball effect, right? Like, if Baylor's up 14-7 early, you force turnover, go up 21-7, TCU fumbles the football, and you go score a touchdown, it's 28-7. Like, it can give you this opportunity to extend a lead and really try to put a team away. And I think Baylor's going to need them on Saturday to win this game.
Yeah, no, it does. And you look at that Texas Tech game specifically of being able to just miscues. And truthfully, TCU's turnovers so many times are just like not protecting the football, bad turnovers, not always the force. So you can't always count on them, but they've shown it in their DNA. Truthfully, this was something they had an issue with last year. And if you look at turnovers lost, simply they're 16th in all games this year in the Big 12. And last year they were 10th. In turnover margin, TCU in 23 was 14th in turnover margin. In 24, they're 16th. Like, this has been an issue for them for 2 seasons now, and really truthfully led to a non-bowl team last year. And now they're at 5-3, but they're kind of like won a lot of 1-possession games where they've turned the ball over. Does it catch up to them? Baylor has to take advantage of that. And like, great example, Oklahoma State game. Baylor forces an Ollie Gordon fumble at the 1. And what do? 4 plays later, score a touchdown. That's 99 yards and completely changed that game. Oklahoma State was about to score. I mean, I don't remember what the score was at that time. It might have been 3-3, and they were about to score up to go 7-10 or 10-3, and they flipped the script entirely. So I'm with you. Like, turnovers are always important, but when teams are turning the ball over already on their own before they even get to your game, then it's like, okay, now we've got to force them. Baylor actually didn't do that to a great extent last week. You thought Alan Bowman's going to throw interceptions. He's done it his entire career. Baylor doesn't get one until the 4th quarter. So now maybe this is another week where TCU's fumbling the ball, they throw interceptions. They just have an issue with ball security in general. I'm anxious to see if they're able to do that. And I mean, pass rush might be part of that. Josh Hoover, I don't know how many strip sacks he has this year, but he has a few where he's fumbling the ball in the red zone. I remember the Stanford game in the first game of the year where TCU's going to scoring before half, and he fumbles inexplicably at the 2 or 3, don't get the touchdown, and made that game probably a lot closer than it should have been. So it's been happening all season for TCU. I'm anxious to see how much of that's been coached this week. But for 2+ seasons, or 1+ season now, almost 2 seasons, they've had the same issues, recurring issues on offense for 20 games now.
Right. And I mean, the last 5, I mean, they have 16 turnovers in the last 5 games.
Yeah.
That's a sample size where it just becomes, I feel like that's just who you are. You're going to give the other team opportunities to turn the ball over. Now, of course, what if they come into McLean Stadium and play a clean football game?
Yeah.
And this is their kind of first one all year, basically. That would be pretty wild. But I think in general, it's in their DNA, but in order for Baylor to take advantage of it, they have to be able to create some havoc. And I don't feel like they did a really good job of that against Oklahoma State. And TCU poses that same kind of challenge because they don't give up a lot of sacks. They don't give up a lot of tackles for loss. You truly have to have guys in coverage that are making passing windows a little bit difficult. You're taking away the run game, forcing them to be one-dimensional. That's really where teams have had a lot of success forcing those turnovers.
Yeah, interesting fact here. TCU, as I just mentioned, is 16th in the Big 12 in turnover margin this year in all games, not just conference games, not just Power 5 games, but all games. Baylor has faced Iowa State, who's number 1 in turnover margin, BYU, who's number 2, Colorado, who's number 4, Texas Tech, who is number 6, and then throw in Oklahoma State, who is number 9. And that kind of speaks to ball security and the teams that Baylor are facing right now. And then at the back half of the schedule, it's kind of interesting because we talked about the defenses being a little bit less in the back half. Well, now you talk about playing teams like TCU, who's number 16, West Virginia, who's number 15 in turnover margin, Houston's number 13 in turnover margin, and then you get to Kansas, who's number 7. So that's kind of flipped for this back half of the season. So maybe we will see Baylor force a few more turnovers against teams who have given it up and not taken it away as much as teams they've already faced. So anxious to see that. Starts this weekend. That's the worst team in the Big 12 in terms of turnover margin. And I'll go to my last point here, and it's take away explosive plays at all costs. I mean, you cannot go into this game against a team who wants to create explosive plays, who leads the league in 20 or 40+ yard plays with 10 in Big 12 games or Power 4 opponents. And against Tech, 42.1% of their yards came on 5% of their plays. So that means 194 yards on 3 plays, and that was 21 points. That was the reason Tech lost that game. I mean, if you watch that game, there's no other reason. And 2 of those came in the first 3 possessions. And they were both touchdowns, get up 14-3. Tech battles back, eliminates those issues. And then in the second half, as Tech's kind of holding on to a lead, they strike again for an 80+ yard touchdown play to Eric McAllister. So that was the difference in the game. Obviously, Texas Tech loses their starting quarterback. Things changed there. They should have kicked a field goal to win it. But TCU, who didn't do anything other than that in the game, they had a couple of other explosives, but for the most part, were under control against Tech. Those 3 plays, Baylor can't afford to do that. Like you can't go into this game without the mindset of eliminating them. Your safeties better be as deep as the players that you're playing. They better tackle well. You can live with a 20-yard play, just don't make it turn into 40 or 80.
Right, and I don't think Baylor's winning a 52-49 type game. I don't think that's how Baylor wants to play this game.
No,
I really just don't. I don't see that happening. I think Baylor would like it to be played more so in the 30s. And so that means you're going to have to limit these explosives. You're going to have to take away at least a couple of these receiving options. I mean, it's hard to take them all completely out. They have 4 really, really good ones. A solid tight end in Drake Dabney. So they have options, and they're going to try to attack your defense in a lot of ways, soften you up a little bit, and then take their shots over the top and take their shots in the short passing game, expecting you to miss a tackle and then running for 70 yards for a touchdown. That's kind of what their bread and butter is, to set you up a little bit. It's a big challenge. And I think, basically what you just said, the explosive plays kind of leans into where I'm at. It's safety play for Baylor. I think that the cornerbacks, for the most part, have held up. I felt like they got some pretty questionable calls last week as far as pass interference goes.
terrible.
They did.
Terrible. I'm not going to come out and say that too often. Like the one on Caden Jenkins late was as bad as it gets, and that was an official. Sorry, I apologize for going on rants, but that was on an official who didn't call a pass interference on the previous possession against Oklahoma State. That was just as bad or worse. So continue. Sorry.
Right. And so I have a belief that Caden's going to be good. It feels like Snacks is probably going to come back based on what Dave Aranda said. It felt that way to me, at least in the press conference. Yeah. If they have those two mixed with the depth that they have, which I still think is quality depth with Tevin Williams, Chateau Reed, we'll see if he can bounce back. And the young guys, LeVar Thornton, Reggie Bush, like they have some depth there to go along with their two starters. But the safety position, and that includes Carl Williams at the star. And maybe they get Kendrick Simpkins back this week. That's possible. And then you're rotating guys all in your safety group. Devin Lemire and Devin Bobby have been your starters, but Corey Gordon and DJ Coleman have played a lot. I just think TCU is going to challenge these guys the whole game. I think they are going to line up guys in the slot, and they're going to say, I think we can win these one-on-one matchups. And so I think Baylor's going to have to kind of be ready for that. You'll see a lot of their guys move around, whether it's Jack Besh or JP Richardson or Savion Williams. They'll kind of move around a little bit in their formations to try to attack that group. And they're going to have to hold up. And I truly do feel like for them to limit explosive plays, it means their safeties are going to have to not allow guys to get behind them. And so those type of things, I think it goes hand in hand a little bit. But Baylor's safety group is going to get challenged, maybe unlike they've gotten challenged all year. I would say even potentially more so than even the Colorado game, because I think TCU has more film on what maybe are the holes in the Baylor defense, more film than Colorado had. And I think TCU's pass protection will hold up a little better than Colorado's did.
Yeah, I would have to go back and watch the Colorado game. But going into the Colorado game, I felt that Baylor might take the approach of what they did against Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl in 21. Dave Aranda did it, and it was you took your Mike linebacker off the field early. You played Terrell Bernard as a will linebacker right behind a jack or an edge player and 3 down linemen, and then you play with 7 defensive backs for the most part. And that was a corner. That was a group that was Kalen Barnes at corner, Al Walcott at cornerback. Lorando Johnson was the third corner, and that's kind of your nickel corner. But then you also had Petrie as a star, who's also a nickel corner in a lot of situations. And then safeties, Jaron McVay and safety, JT Woods. I'm not saying that that's the direction they go for this game, but it wouldn't surprise me because if they feel like they can control the run game with Keaton, who can also match up in the slot in occasions, or a tight end, and then Steve Linton or Garmin Randolph on the edge. And if you watch that Ole Miss game early, that's what they did to Ole Miss, was just like, hey, we can control your run game with 5 guys. 5 guys and 1 guy who can be flexed out. So that just gives you a lot of options in the secondary. Now, what made that work was Jalen Petrie's physicalness against the run. Carl Williams would have to show that ability, but I also really like Corey Gordon in a position to help against the run. He's been really, really good against the run this year. It's just his lack of ability in coverage on all occasions. So it's a time for Baylor safeties to grow up. I mean, that's the reality in this game. If they don't, then Baylor's going to have issues. I just think Dave Aranda schematically has to protect his entire secondary. And you can live to fight another day against this TCU offense, who has shown they're going to get theirs, but they also can flame out. You got to make them run plays or eliminate plays entirely. So it kind of is confusing, but if they're running a lot of plays to score, that means you have more chances in interceptions, turnovers. If they're not running plays at all, that's a pretty good thing. You just don't want where they're scoring on long plays and they're not having the ability to turn the football over. So I'm with you.
And you need your secondary guys to be playmakers against TCU. Like you're going to have these chances where the ball's probably going to hit you in the hands, or where you have an opportunity to strip a receiver or whatever it may be. If you are giving up explosives, or if you're giving up consistent drives, you got to make that up with being a playmaker in the secondary and creating a turnover. And again, I think these safeties are going to have an opportunity to make those kind of plays. They've been in position a few times, but not as much as I would frankly like to see out of the group. I'd like to see them get their hands on more footballs than they have so far this year. And maybe this is the game for that.
Yep. I think it turns in their favor in terms of quarterback play. There's some opportunities to get more turnovers here in the next few games that they haven't necessarily had. But good stuff on the keys. And now we're going to speak to Baylor outside linebacker coach Caleb Collins. get some more insights on his room at the outside linebacker position with Steve Linton, Garmin Randolph, Kyler Jordan, and what they are doing, and also maybe provide some more insight onto what TCU is going to bring to Waco this weekend offensively. So Grayson now joined by Baylor outside linebacker coach Caleb Collins. Caleb, thanks for joining us today, man. Congrats on the last couple wins. How's everything going for you?
Oh man, first off, man, just want to say thank y'all for having me, man. Everything's good. Everything's good, man.
Good. So I know looking back to the 2023 season, I know that's kind of like in the rearview mirror. You're not really thinking about it too much. But last year, there was some struggle with the pass rush. I know it was addressed in the offseason with some of the stuff that you did. That team averaged like 1.2 sacks a game against the conference opponents. But here in 2024, this team has completely flipped the script, averaging almost or 2.5 against the conference opponents. What has changed, and how important is your position group to that boost with Steve and Garmin and Kyler and all those guys just making plays?
Yeah, man, I straight up say that. I think just opportunities to rush is one thing, but then also I just think pairing up with Coach Noakes, man, has really helped me a lot. As far as just keeping things simple, I think Garmin and Steve, man, those guys are, they got the tools. I think where I come in and where I help them is just like, hey, like eliminate some of the thinking. Hey, eliminate like what's your fastball, what's your go-to, what's your counter, rather than teaching a bunch of moves, really just teaching more series, meaning like, all right, this is my move every time, and based off what the tackle give me, I may counter and do that. And I mean, really, that's what we've been teaching since fall camp, and it's been working for us. Some of the stuff, I mean, has been around for so long. I mean, you talk about like teaching progressions from like Pete Jenkins and just old school legendary D-line coaches, but it still works. So it's like, I mean, that's probably that's the cool thing about it.
Coach Steve Linton kind of had a up and down season at Texas Tech last year, but it really seems like he's hitting his stride right now as this season has gone on. What have you seen the biggest development out of him since he's arrived on campus?
I think just openness. I think some of it, when he kind of got here initially, he kind of gave us a little pushback on like, oh, y'all want me to drop here, y'all want me to do this here, y'all want, instead of just like go 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 go. But I mean, just trying to get him to understand like this is all going complete you as a player. Like this is gonna make you the total package rather than just a guy that teams can maybe take away by just saying, hey, let's double this guy, or let's slide it to this guy, let's do this. But in the spring, I think it was a lot of pushback. It was just like, hey, like, man, y'all thinking this, and I just think one day it just clicked for him, like, hey, like, Coach Aranda has passed the test of time, has had top 5 defenses after top 5, top 10 defenses. Like, we ain't changing, bro. Like, you get what I'm saying? So I think, he kind of realized, hey, I can find my groove. Like, I can still be myself, but just fit into the system. And I think that's really worked for him. And, us as coaches also have just found ways to put him in position to have success,
Yeah. So on the other hand, you have a guy like Garmin who decided to come back for an additional year this year.
Right on.
What was his main focus coming back for this additional year? What, obviously last year I know he dealt with some injuries and battled through those things, but what was his offseason like trying to get better for this last year?
Yeah, I think he wanted to like just I think he wanted to leave on a winning note. I mean, we still trying to accomplish that. I mean, what I'm saying, I think Gorman is somebody who really cares a lot about winning and losing. And I know that really bothered him last year going 3-9. So I think that was number one reason he wanted to come back to, with Matt and like to, with as seniors, as these seniors to kind of put together, just a good something good to leave on and hang your hat on. And I think his focus really has really just been like, again, just being consistent. I think at times he last year was, just was up and down. And I think this year he's really just trying to be consistent. And I feel like he has really done that.
I feel like with what y'all did through the transfer portal and just how y'all have kind of recruited the edge position, it feels like y'all are trying to get to a point where you'd like to have 2 edge guys on the field a lot more. Do you think that's kind of a focus for y'all for this season and future seasons?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's Coach Aranda's baby, man. I mean, since I've been with him at LSU, we've always called it as our peso package. It's some people do everything just out of nickel, which is your 3 down linemen, which are your 5 DBs. But Coach Aranda believes in being multiple. Being able to be a nickel 3-4 base team, but also being able to light them up some and go peso. So yeah, I mean, we've with having Gorman and Steve and Kajo and I mean, Kyler Jordan. I mean, those guys are really, giving him the tools he needs, to do his stuff. So that's one thing that we've really taken pride in, that I've just teaching it all and letting them go out there and, give Coach Aranda the bullets he needs in his gun, basically.
Yeah. So looking back, really, it's that Colorado game, and then
Yeah.
through this point, you have faced some similar offenses in that they want to throw the ball, they want to do a lot of different things, but they're different. And then TCU this week, like it's kind of going back to Colorado a little bit. But
Yeah,
what are the
yeah, yeah.
differences
No,
between
man,
you
you on it.
see?
Yeah, you right on it. I mean, that's what my guys talk about. Like, of course they want to rush the pass and they want it to be, drop back pass, not always like play action pass and shots like like your Utahs or maybe your Iowa States. So they excited. I mean, we excited about just the opportunity that's in front of us this week.
What would you
You
say?
spot on.
Yeah. So what would you say the biggest difference in what you're seeing from TCU than maybe Oklahoma State or
Hmm.
Colorado or Tech? I mean, is there anything that different that they do that really stands out?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, great teams, but I think the biggest thing is that Tech and Oklahoma State are going to do everything that they can to establish the run game. And they're gonna keep trying that, and the pass game, even though they have explosive passing offenses, is really more like it opens up off the run game. I think TCU, I think they are a little bit more like, hey, if the run ain't working, cool. Like, let's try to create more explosive plays through the pass game. And I don't think they're gonna just constantly consistently try to establish the run game. And, that's what my guys like. They like to know, hey, it's P and 10, but I could be getting a pass read, like it's clear as day that the offensive line giving us pass keys and stuff like that. So I think that's the biggest thing is they know, like, with a Texas Tech, we knew like our goal number one for that game was stop counter. Like that was goal number one, and we knew they were gonna keep trying to run it. Wise, this week it's it could be P and 10, 1st and 10 within a series, and they'll go 5-step drop back pass. Like that's something that we wasn't getting a whole lot out of Texas Tech and Oklahoma State. So
Good insight.
Coach, this offseason, y'all also brought in another transfer in Jacquez Evans from Western Kentucky. He's only played in 3 games so far. Do you think he'll
right.
get mixed in a little bit more throughout the weeks going forward?
Yeah,
Or
possibly. It's been a little bit mainly injury. He started off the season in camp, had a lingering meniscus injury. They went there and kind of cleaned it up. And again, when at the times where it hasn't bothered him, he is productive. I mean, he's a productive player. But I think it's just working him in. You know what I'm saying? Just trying to test out his knee, letting him continue to get it stronger.
Yeah,
So
so you mentioned Coach Noakes and coaching
yeah.
there on the interior of the line.
Yeah.
What has he brought to the entire defense? Obviously, he has a relationship with Coach Aranda, but what's his
Mhm.
energy like? How valuable is he for you as a resource to lean on?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I learned from day one was like, just his sternness. Like, if something is supposed to be a certain way, if he's coaching something and something is supposed to be a certain way in meetings, like you could tell his whole group owns the fact that like, nah, like we gonna do it this way. And I think that was just something for me, you know what I'm saying? Like it seems like the last 2 years with multiple transfers, new additions, this and that, it's like, hey, let me try to win these guys over and then try to boom, be stern on them. But like, man, I just learned that from Noakes. Like, nah, like you gotta be stern, from day one, and then, like just show them that you love them and appreciate them. But like, I mean, the ball is the ball. Like they gotta do what it is, and it ain't no compromise on that. So I think that's that. And then I think the second thing is just man, sure, he a dang good coach. I mean, he's coached guys like Aaron Donald and TJ Watt, and the list goes on. And it's like, shoot, you see why those guys have the success that they have. Cause I mean, he keeps stuff simple. And I mean, he just demands it and he puts the time in. I mean, Noakes is one of the first ones here day in and day out. So he just an old school, like OG, stern coach. Like he just ain't going for nothing. Like that's just him, man. So
That's cool.
yeah.
Coach, when you're out on the recruiting trail or when you're looking into the transfer portal and you're evaluating your position, what are some of
Mhm.
the top traits you're kind of looking for your edge spot?
Yeah, man. I think I love length. Like I think, man, just if you're gonna be short limbed, if you're gonna be like, not necessarily like playing with a whole bunch of separation, you better be like a freaking explosive, twitchy, like hard to block son of a gun. But I think just guys with just natural length and pop can, extend themselves. Like even though we gonna typically being on the line of scrimmage, we gonna lose the weight battle. We gonna typically be outweighed. But if you can get a good strike and have some separation, man, all plays are yours to make. So I think that's a huge thing for me. It's like if you're not gonna be a a lone guy, you better be a freaking explosive, like get on, get off of blocks guy. So I think that's one thing. And then I think just pass rush ability. I know that's kind of hard. Like, what is pass rush ability? But I just mean like just a natural knack for getting after the quarterback, man. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, I think I'm gonna teach it. I got my teaching progressions, this and that, but it's like it's gotta be something in the kid that's like, coach, like let me rush. Like, you get what I'm saying? Like, I want a guy that's like they tell Coach Aranda tells this story all the time about when he first got to LSU. And he was installing his defense, and like I think there was maybe a scrimmage or something. And he said Arden Key was like, "Hey, coach, what's them calls? What's the call that I rush?" And coach was like, "You talking about Saw?" He's like, "Call that one." But he tells that story jokingly, but it's like that's the type of guy you want. Like, coach, I would drop out of respect for the scheme and the defense, and I would drop like out of respect for, again, want to be multiple and this and that. But coach, I want you to know at the bottom of my heart, I want to be getting after the quarterback, and that's the guy you want. That's the guy you want when I'm out in recruiting and stuff like that. Like, the guy who may be playing some safety and is a freak athlete and this and that. I still may have some question marks on, like, does he want to get after the quarterback? Like, he could be, 5-star, 4-star, this and that athlete, but like if I put him in the trenches, is he gonna be able to win against that tackle? I feel like that's something that I think is huge evaluation on that. Like, even if you aren't the most athletic guy, which we love athletes like that, if I just see that you got like a knack for getting after the quarterback and winning one-on-ones, then shoot, you're gonna probably be high on the board.
Yeah. So for this week specifically, I mean, we know it's TCU, and I know that y'all have been around long enough. You kind of know the fans' perspective on the TCU matchup. Has this week been any different for you guys in prepping and the energy level in terms of being TCU, or is this just another game at the end of the day trying to win one?
Yeah, I think definitely, man. I mean, after everything we done been through from last year to this year, I mean, I just think, man, like we just nobody want to go back to that feeling. Like, I just think like we want, granted, I mean, some of it is a faceless opponent. We could be playing whoever. Nobody in this building wants to go back to the feeling of defeat. So I just think that and it continues to mount. Week after week, it just continues to mount since the bye week. It's feel like it's like, granted, we got, whatever TCU rivalry, all that, and that adds extra. But I think the biggest driving force is like we've been saying this is the team we are all year and year after year. You get tired of saying, hey, we got a good football team, we got a this and that. Like, we are, you get tired, and like, boom, to explode like we did versus Tech, to win versus a gritty team fighting for everything like Oklahoma State. Like, it's now really saying like we are the team who we thought we were. Like, let's not go back to being that team we were for those 3 losses in a row.
Coach, do you feel like there's just this kind of different mentality and momentum right now in the locker room, just after, going through the struggles and feeling like you're a much better team than your record says, but then kind of turning this corner off of the bye week? Do you get the sense of that a little?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'm gonna give credit. I definitely feel like, the offense really have been rolling. I feel like, what I'm saying, like even, Iowa State, to one of the top 2 defenses in our league, even versus them, you saw like, boom, we talked about all week starting fast, and shoot, offense came out, put up 3 scores like that. Like, what I'm saying? And I mean, of course, the game went how it went, but I feel like they have been really, I think, the bye week for us defensively, and just having a leader like Coach Aranda, man. Thank God for Coach Aranda, but just like really being able to say, hey, it's a lot of stuff you could throw up on the wall and say this, what, X, Y. These are the things we need to get fixed. I think that was huge. And, all of us as coaches owning that and saying like, hey, these are the things we need to get fixed. And I mean, it started from practice 1 in the bye week, subtracting things, simplifying things, putting our guys in position to play fast, being careful how we coach a thing, being careful about how much information we give to those guys. All that stuff has really flipped the switch for us defensively. And granted, we ticked off. We gave up 2 late garbage touchdowns versus Texas Tech. You would have thought that Sunday meeting when we got together as a defensive staff, you would have thought we lost how Coach Aranda was on us. So, I mean, and even versus Oklahoma State, we were super excited about the success we had in the run game. But, I mean, just other things in the past, really tackling. I ain't going to even say the pass. It was tackling. Just hard to really enjoy the win when that's the case. So another opportunity to get it fixed this weekend. We excited about that.
Good. Coach, we really appreciate your time visiting with us, and good luck the rest of the season and obviously this weekend against TCU.
Man, thank y'all for having me, man.